figuring they're just going to pitch you.
Yeah, and there were no issues with. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. It's now 11:30. I'm going to go ahead and kick off our pre-commission. So I don't have any reports for the president's report. So I guess, is there any housekeeping items or other discussion items that the commission would like to address at this time? I also just want to say thank you to our staff presentations at the joint meeting yesterday with Garden City. Did an excellent job. And I was asking the mayor how long it's been, and he said it's been at least 5 years since that we've had a joint meeting with them. Anyway, long overdue. So great job. All right, the next thing, any other questions about today's agenda? If not, all right, Director, over to you.
Madam President, thank you. Commissioners, good morning. We have a varied group of topics today for all of you. First off, and I'm going to say most importantly, I'd like to bring Jennifer up because she has some very special introductions for all of you.
Madam President, Commissioners, last week we had our equipment rodeo, our ACHD equipment rodeo. It was a fantastic event, had a lot of participants, more participants in the events this year than we had in the previous year. Really top-notch competitors. What I always appreciate about the equipment rodeo, and thank you for those who did attend. Appreciate your attendance there and your visibility to the crews. But what's really outstanding about the equipment rodeo is it really showcases the best of the best that we have. They all have an opportunity to operate equipment they don't necessarily operate every day. And those who do operate it every day or who come to us with a lot of experience, it really highlights that in a showcase that we wouldn't necessarily all get to see. One of the really cool things that we saw in our top 3 finishers in each of the events was how many of those were new employees. Outstanding work that our HR department has done to bring us new talent, and it really ups the bar for our competition. As you see here on my left and in front of you is the coveted trophy cup, where we have put the markers on there for the competitors that have done well in the national competition. So what I'd like to do right now is introduce you to our top finishers in our ACHD competition that will be going to compete on the national level and hopefully bring back some hardware like this. So no pressure, but I'll bring forward, or just have them stand where they are. How would you like to? We'll bring them forward, and then we have a chance for you guys to meet them. From the truck course team, our first place finishers were Robert Henry and Chris Boatwright. The grader course, first place, Grayson Truden. The skid steer course, first place, Danny Garland. Our loader course, first place, Dan Whittel. Again, this is really the best of the best, and I'm very excited to present this team to you as they will be going forward to compete at the National Rodeo Competition later this year in the fall. Thank you.
Commissioners, Jennifer was absolutely on target, best of the best. We have 2 rules. Rule number 1, beat ITD. Rule number 2, more gold coming back here and such, but they're going to do absolutely phenomenal. Commissioners, I'd next like to introduce to you a former but fellow ACHD team member, former Deputy Director of Plans and Projects, Dave Wallace, and he's going to brief you on a very important aspect that will be coming here to Meridian here in the very, very near future. Dave? Wow, he can actually stand.
Yes, I can still get vertical, and oddly enough, I have at least one suit that still fits. Madam President, Commissioners, thank you very much for seeing me today. As the director said, I'm Dave Wallace. I'm an alumnus. For those of you with sharp eyes, you'll notice I have my 5-year pin on. I was somehow unable to get to 10 years because the pressure just got to me. I think that's the limit of snarkiness I got for today. Mr. Hanson, Mr. Goldthorpe have witnessed that snarkiness. Actually, so has President of the Commission. So, Madam President and Commissioners, you probably already know what I'm going to mention. This is a brief presentation about something called The Wall That Heals. I've given a bunch of brochures. I know that the director has mentioned this to you. He's mentioned it to his staff as well. I just want to put a face on what's going on. A friend of a friend asked me to be the volunteer coordinator for the visit of The Wall That Heals to the Sensi campus at the end of June this year. Just so you know, this wall has never been to this part of Idaho anyway. There are several versions of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall that mill around America. This one is the one that is funded by the monument that was funded in Washington, D.C., the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. They're the only one that sanctioned it. There are 6 or 7 versions. This is the one that sets the standard. So, because I was asked to do this, I said yes, but next time I think I'm going to look both ways before I cross that road. The wall was designed by Maya Lin, as you may know. Many of you may have been to see this in Washington, D.C. It's a moving memorial. I recommend, if you've not been, and perhaps if you have been, go see it at night. Actually, go see all the monuments in Washington, D.C. at night. Personally, I think the spookiest one is the Korean War Memorial, but easily the most moving is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. There are opportunities for us to host this. More on that in a second. The wall, as you know, is a place to grieve, to celebrate, and to learn. There's an education center that comes with The Wall That Heals. You should see a trademark thing floating in the air around that phrase, because that's what they insist on calling this version of it. As I said, many prefer to visit the monuments in Washington, D.C. at night, and I expect there'll be a lot of people visiting this at night as well. We're going to man this, I use the term loosely, for 24 hours a day for the 4 days that it'll be here. It arrives by a very large vehicle on Tuesday afternoon, the 27th of June. It will be escorted by a motorcycle escort that will not be led by Director Wong, although I don't know whether he will actually be in this, so I'll let that float in the air. Wednesday morning, the 28th of May, starting at 8 o'clock, we're going to put the wall up. And I say we, this is a volunteer effort. Imagine, if you will, 7.5 foot tall countertop made of marble. There are pieces of this that have to be hauled and set in place. The folks that run this will have a couple of experts along who will provide everything, including gloves and sledgehammers, to build this, and instruction on how to do it. More on that in a second. The other opportunity to serve for this will be as a host. There are 3-hour segments, and this is something you may have heard about. I put together a portal, a volunteer portal, if you will, where people can go in and look at a day and a time and a type of duty that they would like to fulfill, and help to host this in a way. There are 2 ceremonies included in this. One is the opening ceremony on Thursday morning, the 29th. As soon as this is set up on Wednesday afternoon, on the 28th, it'll be open, and we will be hosting as we will throughout the time. So the first ceremony that formally opens this is at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning, and there will be another ceremony on Friday night at 9:30. It's hard to imagine this, but it'll actually be summertime then, and so there'll be a fair amount of light. And there will be a reading of the 218 Idaho names that are on the wall. Several people have already signed up to host. I understand that Mr. Daigle, a veteran himself, has assigned a specialist here to look after this. Some of the folks that have signed up include the public information officer from STAR, whose father's name is on the wall. Deputy Director Head has also signed up for hosting time. He tells me that his father's best friend, who saved his life, is on the wall. So my ask for you today, and I appreciate the time here, is that you, the commission, support staff participation in this, either or both, helping to build and tear it down, because we will need to take it back down again on Sunday afternoon, or to host one of the periods that I mentioned, one of the 3-hour periods. And if any of you would like to participate in hosting, we'd be delighted to have you. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Commissioners? We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
That sounds great. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate your time.
Commissioners, a couple administrative items as we go forward. First off, the Boise Bike Project and Boise City have approached our ACHD team to begin discussions on some open streets events that they'd like to do this fall and next spring. Now, open street programs basically means events that we close the roads on going forward. They're hoping to get some level of support from ACHD on these events. No locations or anything has been done yet. This was just a heads up sort of thing. Our team is involved, but I have recommended that the first roads that they consider is the ones around the Capitol and such, and we'll go from there. Should be fun. Later on this afternoon, 3 o'clock.
Director, I just want to clarify. It's opening. It's temporarily closing off streets, not moving forward. Yeah, it's just
right.
Temporary for a period of time. To vehicle traffic, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Again, that idea about the Capitol sure seems really good, though.
It might help with safety.
Commissioners, later on this afternoon, we will be hosting Clint Heckman Lively's retirement ceremony after over 25 years of service here at the district and such, and just a tremendous loss of experience to the Ada County Highway District. Earlier, and I put a little map in front of you, you may have seen my note regarding an action on Ashton Street in Meridian. And the requests from the neighbors in Ashton Street have been for traffic calming. So our team went out, they took a look, and I'll let you know that they did meet the peak hour volume as in our current policy, and they met the speed threshold. They have returned the petition with the required number of signatures, so they put a lot of effort into this. However, they were a slight percentage below the threshold requirement for cut-through operations. Our staff has met with the gentleman, and our staff, based on policy, initially said, I'm sorry you don't meet the criteria based on that little bit of a percentage below threshold for cut-through. The deputy director and I have spoken about that, and we believe that this warrants an opportunity for judgment moving forward. And so if they had met all the criteria, we would be moving forward and placing 5 speed cushions, approximately $30,000 worth of equipment in there and such, but they did not. So I would like to let you know, I'd like to ask you may have noticed that the director's report is tagged as an action item today. It is my intention to waive what I can from this, which is up to $10,000, to put this in to support the neighborhood when it comes down to the request for speed mitigation. I'd like to get a head nod, yes or no, from you all, if you are okay with moving forward with the rest of the $20,000 to put in all speed cushions to support the neighborhood on this. And so that's my request. Like I said, the deputy director and I have sat down. We believe it's in the best interest of the neighborhood to move forward on this based on all the stuff they've done with our current policy criteria. And like I said, I have a waiver authority, but it's only up to so much. So I'd like to know what you think about this. Thumbs up from over there, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Director. Commissioner McKinney, did you have a question?
Yeah, can I just ask, what criteria was it that was close, and how close was it?
It was a cut through. They missed it by, I think, by 5%.
Or are we talking volume?
Yeah.
Okay, and so what's the threshold?
23% that they have to have, that we see 23% cut-through traffic going through the neighborhood based on the current policy. So my thought is based on that criteria. My judgment in this would be to say, thank you, let's move forward and support the neighborhood on that.
And so on the other factors, speed, it did meet the
It
criteria.
met the criteria. It met the criteria for volume, peak hour volume, and speed threshold. So people are speeding. There's a lot of traffic going through there. It is a neighborhood. So if you notice on the map, it comes off of one of our major arterials going in. And so my request to you is, my recommendation is let's move forward. And if it was in solely my authority, I would waive this and move forward on it.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree.
Commissioner Hanson?
Madam President, I would agree. This does expose the weakness of our policy. Volumes should have far less to do with it than speeds. I've proposed changes in our speed management policies. It should be the priorities of the neighborhood and the city's PD that helps to drive where we prioritize, not if a neighborhood gets organized, which I'm glad they got organized and then they presented this. It should be a priority. There's streets in the area that I represent that need to be addressed, and it becomes more difficult, and we don't have a procedure for the cities to come in and say, this is a priority for us, this is where we've seen this. Volume just doesn't make sense to me, especially if a child is killed on that street and say, sorry, we couldn't put speed cushions in because the traffic we tracked is not cut-through traffic. Which is the other question, is how on earth do we decide whether a car going through is cut-through traffic or not cut-through traffic? Do we follow them from their origin to their destination? So it just seems bizarre. I think that's another weakness, serious weakness. Probably one of the major policy changes I wanted to see happen. So I would definitely say this is important. And the other thing is I would automatically put that into the evaluation for programs for permanent traffic calming. Clearly, this road was probably constructed too wide. It's a collector. There's not other options to cut through that to connect with other parts of the neighborhood. So other speed mitigation things should be considered in our integrated 5-year work plan, because of course speed cushions also slow emergency traffic, and that makes it difficult. Whereas curb extensions, where people can drive while they're driving through, it's easier to get out of the way. You can't take a speed cushion and get it out of the way while a fire truck can go through, whereas a car and other things can get out of the way while a fire truck goes through. So those are my more than 2 bits over this, but I would definitely say we should prioritize this, and I hope that the next thing we work on in terms of our policy are the profound weaknesses in our speed mitigation policy.
Madam President,
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
I'm going to say yes, but I look at this very differently than Commissioner Hanson. I look at this as a way that the commission can publicly and very openly give permission for something to do something that is the right thing to do, because we're going to take the responsibility anyway. And if we abrogate that responsibility to other groups, we're still going to get the responsibility no matter who ultimately makes it or requests it. So this particular means of approval, I fully support.
Commissioner Gold?
Madam President, thank you. I support the director's recommendation as well.
And I do as well, Director. I just want to echo, I think there's I just think of a lot of folks in my district that haven't met this threshold, don't fit the requirements of the policy, and they're going to say, well, what about us too? And so I think that absolutely we want to be able to approve this. We want to see projects like this happen. But I think in essence of what Commissioner Hanson is saying too, I think we need to look at the entire thing too, to make sure that there is a fair policy so that everybody can know how to go about asking for these things, and then they know where they're at and how they can see traffic calming instituted into their own communities. So Absolutely. Thank you for bringing this to us. Thank you for the opportunity for us to help support this community, and looking forward to the updates.
Well, commissioners, thank you. That is my director's report for today. I'll stand for any questions if you have some and you have a little bit of extra time.
Thank you, sir. Questions? All right, we're at ease until noon. 12 o'clock. Welcome everyone that's in person and online. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda, and if a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. If there are no such requests, I will stand for a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. The first item is Resolution 2399 surplus property request for adoption. This is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and welcome Joe.
Good afternoon, President Pickering, Commission. I'm Joe Schoen, Fleet Manager. So today I am presenting on Resolution 2399 for the sale and surplus of equipment. The equipment is personal property of Ada County Highway District and is no longer useful to the district or necessary for its use, and declaring such property to be surplus. The value is determined to be in excess of $10,000 and authorizing the sale of such property to the general public by auction. All personal property is listed in Exhibit A. The public hearing is to be held today, Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 at 12 p.m., 12:02, here at Adams Street. 25 pieces of equipment with an expected value of $272,100. Staff recommends the Commission approves Resolution 2399, declaring the surplus property in Exhibit A no longer useful or necessary to the district and to be sold by public auction by Dealers Auto Auction of Idaho on May 20th, 2023. Stand for any questions.
Madam President?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, just one. How is it we get away with a 0% commission doing this?
That is great. They are the low bidder. I believe that they take the profits when the purchaser pays.
They know folks will be there to buy other stuff. Huh?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
Joe, I know the staff report had an exhibit with the listing the items, but would you take just a moment to kind of summarize the sorts of things that are on that list? I think it'd be helpful for the public.
Yeah. So President Pickering, Commissioner McKinney, the majority of those items are passenger vehicles, either vans or pickup trucks. We do have 8 sweepers that will be available. In there's a couple miscellaneous items such as a flatbed, a couple trailers.
Okay, so basically motor vehicles,
Yep.
trucks and vans and so on. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anyone else that we need to invite to member of the public? Okay, well, with that, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Madam President?
Commissioner.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Schoen. Okay. Next item is resolution number 2400, vacation of public right-of-way for 587 West Main Street in Cuna. This public hearing has been open, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. And then, welcome. Dave, do you wanna come on up?
Madam President, I was just going to say that the application is withdrawn, so we would need to close the public hearing. So that's all.
Do we need to have a motion to withdraw?
No, I don't think so. Yes. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. I'll stand for a motion.
Madam President, I move that we withdraw resolution number 2400 with regard to the vacation of private right-of-way in Cuna.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Serdar. Okay, is there anyone, a member of the public that would like to address the commission at this time? Okay, well with that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Only 6 minutes long. 2 items, I think that's pretty good. All right, so moving into our post-commission agenda. So we've got work sessions here on 2 policy items. I'm going to welcome Mr. Price. Do you want to come on up? The first one is the partner agencies, specifically cities in the county, having the ability to appeal a staff decision to the commission. So just for clarification, that gives them the opportunity and clarifies that they can approach the commission with a request to appeal something that they have worked with staff. This does not mean that we automatically approve it, we just can hear it. So just point of clarification there. And Stacy printed off the suggested language that Steve and I came up with. And it's that 2-paper one with just that one little sentence at the end. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you if you want to provide just the verbiage and the location and all that good stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. Steve Price, General Counsel. This issue about city standing raised on a development project on Broad Street in downtown, and the issue came up. We had planned on, we were directed at that time to look at the standing issue and look at the policy. We've been sitting on it ever since then. We were going to incorporate it in a much bigger policy change, but we felt like that this was a good time to do it. The language in this is only specific to the appeal section in the development policy. It simply says Ada County taxing districts, including cities or the county, shall have automatic standing to an appeal and a final decision for a development application. Now, that gets it done. That it would deal with the Broad Street, but Commissioner Pickering, or President Pickering, asked us to look at developing a broader policy, and you can't do it in this subsection. We would do it in a section that deals with all the policies. And if there's ever a time that the city or county or taxing districts, and I wanted to be inclusive of all of them, that they would have the ability to come in on any basically policy issue before the commission, and they would have standing. And so that change will be forthcoming. We really couldn't do it in just this limited adoption, but we will be coming back with that in the near future that'll be more comprehensive as to the city being able to come before the commission on really any issue and wouldn't be limited by any technical standing issue. So with that, Madam President, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Commissioners, questions, thoughts?
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
Steve, I wonder if we can, let's just sort of maybe step back and look at this from the 10,000 foot level. What are the pros and cons of the standing issue with respect to any and all of these types of decisions? That is to say, what are the reasons to always grant standing? as opposed to reasons to say no, not necessarily. And likewise, when we say taxing districts, does that include everyone? Who does it leave out? Who does it include? And so on. I just want to make sure, that we have a clear understanding of the entire scope of this.
Sure. Good question, Madam President. I'm sorry, Commissioner McKinney. The pros is the district has really, at least during my tenure, we have tried to work with our partnering agencies as well as other taxing districts and make sure that as part of any commission decision that we have their input that may impact them. And I think this is a good step forward to get that done. And I think that there are a lot of plans that cities develop that we may not catch, and this could make sure that we're being inclusive of their input. Any cons? Well, I don't see too many cons, because anytime that this issue's come up, the commission has always kind of waived the standing issue in an effort to make sure that those entities are heard, whatever's before the commission. So I don't see it as a huge downside. I don't think it's going to complicate anybody's substantive due process. I'm a big proponent of making sure that anybody who comes to this agency, that we recognize and honor their substantive due process rights. If anything, this is more inclusive of that. So I can't really think of anything. I don't think this is a huge shift in the way that the district has done business. It's just that it's made clear and we can't trip somebody up on some technical issue. Now, in terms of taxing districts, the reason why I included taxing districts, we don't deal with them. Mosquito abatement's a taxing district. Grave Cemetery is a taxing district as well, but more importantly, school districts. And I think that just by having it open, that anybody that's funded by taxpayer money, that they should have the ability to come into the district, and if they have an issue with something that's before the commission, then they can't be tripped up on some standing issue that they would be able to present. And it happens. And I think that this would take care of that. I tried to think of, I wanted to be more inclusive. That's why I used the term taxing districts, than just start naming them all, because a lot of the taxing districts, there's like 200 taxing districts in the state. I don't think there are going to be very many, but I wanted to make sure we didn't leave anybody out. Now, if you like that more specific, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, Madam President. Well, if I may, as a follow-up, and I guess, when we talk about standing, of course, my natural inclination is to, look at this the way a lawyer looks at standing. And of course, standing is an important issue on the one hand, because in any given case, there are lots of people who may have interest in a particular issue, but are, not necessarily in a position, in a legal position to have standing. It's normally only the parties to a dispute, or the parties to some sort of, a legal, contention, I guess. And I suppose the only danger I can think of is that, when we open the gates and widen our rules about standing, the potential danger is that some party who might have an interest but isn't really, some taxing district who is interested in something but isn't really connected with it, could basically now has standing to file an appeal and gum up the works, basically. It's the concern that you have. Now, the truth is, the rules for appealing decisions, we have those set up. And fortunately, an appeal here at the Ada County Highway District is not like an appeal in a federal court. So of course, it's not nearly as onerous. So I suppose the dangers are not quite as grave. Well, they're significantly less, admittedly. And I guess given that fact, because on the other hand, I'm absolutely in agreement that in every case, we want to have as much information as possible, and don't want any public entities or citizens, what have you, to feel like the facts were not all heard. And so that's the reason, definitely, to open this up. So I guess, all things considered, it makes sense.
Madam President?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, I can understand this because it only includes taxing districts that are the county or the cities, correct?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, no, it includes everybody.
Well, I'd rather not see that happen because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of taxing districts other than the schools that, now, you mentioned Mesquite. You know, they're never going to be interested in us, but who else could there be?
Well, Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, that's the problem, is I don't know exactly who, there's so many different circumstances that would come.
We've never had anybody except cities and the schools in the last 8 years come before us for any reason.
That's all very true, but, and if you want to limit it to schools, districts, I'm fine with that. Generally, you will find when I start drafting in policy, I want to make sure I don't leave anybody out, and I want it to be broad because it'll be that one time that we do that, and then all of a sudden we'll be stuck with another Broad Street. And I'm happy to limit it to school districts. That's fine, but who knows, there may be somebody else that comes in that we may have impacted on a development application and not provided, and they got tripped up and we don't allow standing.
Just to follow up, because we all here, well, not all of us, but we've witnessed several occasions where neighbors who, whether they participated or not in our open meeting process and PIMs and everything else, came in at the very last moment thinking they could have standing to ask us to reconsider and do other things. And I don't want to see that happen.
Well, Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, those would have to, individuals or neighborhoods, or they still have to follow our policy. The problem is that in the prior instance, our policy didn't allow the city or the county.
No,
So that's the only problem we're trying to fix. In terms of anybody else that have a concern over how you sit as a quasi-judicial commission, when you're in that capacity, they would still have to comply with those rules.
You know, and the reason why I wouldn't mind to see the school districts, but in 8 years, we've only had one instance where the school district was upset with what we'd done, and that was with regards to Hawaii High School and landlocking another developer's private property, and that was kind of an interesting fight, actually.
Yes.
And as far as that goes, I would never want us to put an issue of standing in front of the issue of property rights. And so I'm fine with seeing the school districts included, but not everybody else.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, Madam President, yeah, that, a lot to say, but I'll try and keep it brief. Yeah, over 2 years ago, we had this issue coming up. I proposed language that included general purpose governments, because general purpose governments have law enforcement, they have land use authority, the Land Use Planning Act applies to them. But for some reason, the commission gave the sense, certainly to the legal counsel, don't do anything. So we didn't do squat for 2 years. And that's unfortunate because presumably there have been other things discussed about, you know, before it gotten up to our level. And I think it's absolutely critical that we automatically recognize the standing of the general purpose governments, because they do have an obligation. Now, they may prefer, some staff in some cities may prefer to just say, hey, I'd rather not make that hard decision and blame ACHD. And so we give them the excuse, and so they get off the hook. But because, and the cost to the city of that whole Broad Street thing was ridiculous. They should have automatically had standing to come into here immediately to come and tell us what their land use plans were for that area, and that there were policies that were getting in the way, and that we had the ability to waive those policies, but we couldn't even hear them until they had standing to come to us. So it was this sort of comedy of errors, which a simple solution would have been to just simply adopt a broad inclusion that the general purpose governments. You know, the whole issue of calling it for just any taxing districts, I'm not sure. My preference is obviously for language to say the general purpose governments, maybe include the school districts because they're major property owners and taxing districts, and that we apply it to the entire policies, notwithstanding any other references. So
Commissioner Hanson,
that's what my view is of this. I think we should move on this fast. We should have moved on it 2 years ago. Should have never been an issue, but it's almost farcical that it is still an issue.
I have a clarifying question for you. So when you say general purpose government, does that exclusively mean cities in the county?
Yep. So the two taxing districts that have law enforcement, land use planning act, they're referred to generally as general purpose governments. I don't know if that's the term of art that's in the statute, but it makes it clear that that's the case. And so if we wanted to add school districts to that because they're major property and taxing districts, no problem with that.
Madam President.
Let's move forward on that and make it apply to all of the policies. It's frustrating that we're still waiting for these policy changes to happen. And it's like, well, let's wait until we do the whole thing. I totally disagree with that. If we see a problem in the policies, let's fix it. And let's not wait year after year after year to say, no, we're going to do this gigantic policy overhaul. I strongly oppose that. And that's why I appreciate finally that we're dealing with pieces of the policies as the problems have arisen.
So Commissioner Hanson, just before Commissioner Goldthorpe, so the reason why we wanted to get this one off the table really quickly is because of that quick turnaround, right? But we also talked about how we want to apply this language, whatever we decide on, to the 1,000 section. So that's something that we've talked about as well, that we would go through that section because it's separate, very separate from the rest of our policy manual, and that this language would be encompassed into that section. So when we cover that section, that's when I'm hoping that we will have that general North Star with this language plus other language that we've talked about. So it's not being delayed, it's just, it'll be incorporated into that other section as well so that it applies to the entire policy manual.
Yeah, no,
but just because
that's
there's
good.
lots of development decisions that are being done every day by staff, we did feel like this needed to be done expeditiously and be the first policy that we discuss and hear and have a public hearing on.
If I may, Madam President, the whole issue of standing relates to substantive due process, which really falls within when you are sitting as a quasi-judicial commission.
And then just to your point about timing, so the plan is we have this work session today, get your feedback, and this has been helpful so far, but Steve has already posted that we're going to have a public hearing on this on May 3rd. So that is when we will take it to a vote because it's fairly simple. And I think that that's a great way for us to just kind of get the ball rolling, right? So, and then following the access management policy. So nothing's being delayed. We're working
I
on
appreciate it. It's moving faster than it has in 10 years that I've been here.
Okay. Commissioner?
Madam President, if I can,
Steve,
I wanted to follow up. But we've looked at, I sent an all call to all staff. So the only issue really for standing is really within our development policy. The other, most of it is legislative in terms of your capacity, and standing is not an issue in that context. The only other place that we could really think of it is when we're doing vacations. And the city already is authorized to provide comment. So I don't have a problem with the overbroad. I just don't think it'll be as applicable as it will in this policy. The second issue is, I'm sitting here thinking, well, what other taxing districts? Well, what about CCDC?
Mm-hmm.
I could, if you give us enough time, we could probably come up with a few. So, that's my concern is I'm not, if it becomes a problem, then we can be more limiting, but I don't want to run into a situation where we leave somebody out And there's 200 and something, but maybe 2 or 3, but you never know. But I'm happy to take it down and narrow it down so it's more specific. So happy to do that.
And
But
so-
I'm just trying to explain why we drafted it this way.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think we could always, just like with any policy rewrite, we could always dial it back, right? If something is looking like the scope is too broad, we can always adjust it. So, but Commissioner Goldthorpe, your
Yes,
thoughts?
is the state of Idaho considered a taxing district?
No,
Is the state of Idaho considered a general purpose government?
no,
Really?
no,
Okay. I was worried about that.
no. Only under the Idaho Constitution, only municipalities in the county are defined as general purpose governments. And of course, we're a specific purpose government, and that's we're in, kind of a home rule state. The legislature has full control, and so they're really more of a legislative body. Yes, they tax, and I get all that, but in terms of local government law, they're really the only general purpose
Well,
governments.
if you'd have said yes on either of those, I could just see one of any number of legislators saying, I object, I want to have a hearing, and, no thanks.
The legislators can't act individually, they'd have to act as a body, so,
Oh, I know a few of them that would try.
yeah. Well, they'll still try, but.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney?
the comment was made a moment ago that if we open it up like this and then later decide that that's not workable, we can change it back. And I pause for a moment at that. Is that actually the case? Or for example, if we grant standing in a broad manner and then later, standing confers with it certain legal rights. And if we later scale that back, now we're taking away those rights that have previously been granted. Does that not give us any kind of a legal problem?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, no, I don't think so.
And then would it, and this is kind of a comment for the rest of the commission to consider, perhaps we ought to consider being more specific and listing what we think is the complete group and adding to that any other, governmental or, whatever the term would be for taxing districts, can request waiver, and maybe that doesn't even need to be said here because that's always the case anyway, right? We can waive our standing rules and hear something if we want to. And so if we try to specify the types of groups that we want to grant automatic standing and say, any others that we have the discretion to waive the standing requirement, allow others. Perhaps that's a better way to go. And I'm kind of thinking about that after Commissioner Goldthorpe's comments, that maybe that's.
Call it urban renewal districts instead of listing all the, like CCDC.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you would go general there on urban renewal districts, yeah.
So maybe when it comes time to consider adopting something, Steve, perhaps you could give us 2 alternatives for language and we could
Okay.
choose between
Sure.
the 2 on that.
Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson?
I'm fine with moving forward with this language. I mean, ultimately, the decision's always with the commission. Giving somebody standing or an entity, a government entity, a taxing entity standing to come to the commission does not guarantee them that we're gonna support or future commission's gonna support their position. It just gives them the ability to come in front of us without the added cost of having to go through the process, the added costs of the Broad Street stuff on the city of Boise, the taxpayers of Boise, was ridiculous. So just make it clear that they can come. They can come before the commission then decides up or down whether their appeal is granted or not. It's just getting in the door. I think it's pretty straightforward. And I appreciate your comments, President Pickering, that we're gonna move on the other aspects.
And I thank you, Commissioner Hanson. I just want to, Commissioner McKinney, your point about the waiver idea. I think the intention, has been pretty clear, but I think the waiver piece doesn't solve the problem that I'm intentionally trying to solve here, and that's making it really clear who has standing, who doesn't, and that we are able to have that transparent, accessible conversation with our city and taxing district partners. The waiver piece, I think, just muckies it up a little bit more and makes it a little bit more complicated. Who can have the waiver? Who does or who doesn't? Where does it go? Does the commit? I mean, I think it makes it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. And just talking to some of our cities, because we're personally going to invite every city to attend this public hearing on the 3rd, because I've heard from other cities, well, we just assume that we're not allowed to because it's confusing. So we don't ask, or we don't know who to ask. And there's just, even with it as it's written now, there's lots of confusion. And I think this, what we have proposed now just makes it really clear and solves the problem that we have. And I think what cities have had for a while, but they haven't gone through asking for a waiver to appeal to the commission. So just that barrier alone has decreased their desire to approach the commission because that extra step. So, okay, Commissioner Gold, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I agree with your comments and the intent in trying to clarify this, and also Commissioner Hansen's comments around, the decision being with the commission whether or not to grant an appeal. So I think the broad language is inclusive and okay, and I'm also open to seeing an option, an alternate option for wording from Steve, and look forward to hearing what the cities have to say at the public hearing.
So Commissioner Gold, I mean, folks have talked about a second option, but we haven't been really clear about what would be in that second option. So would that just be specific to potentially school districts, urban renewal districts, like that type of flavor of a second option? One that's more inclusive to everything versus one that's more specific? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, again, I don't have issue with the broad and inclusive language, but I guess my question might be, if a sewer district or a urban renewal district wants to appeal, but they don't have standing because the language is too specific, then could cities or the county appeal on their behalf, or no? Okay. Yeah, I think the general.
Madam President, I mean, that's a really good point. You got irrigation districts. I mean, you can get into it. But if, as Commissioner McKinney, it would read something like this. I mean, I can just do it in my head. Ada County, cities of Ada County shall have automatic standing to appeal a final decision. Any other taxing districts would have a right to appeal for a waiver for standing. That's essentially what I thought I heard you say. And if you want to do that, that would be that's pretty rough, but that would be the alternative. That would be the substance of what we would be trying to achieve. But I don't see any ghosts in this broad language. I really don't. I think it'll just go on through time, and I think those agencies, sewer districts, irrigation districts, water districts, drainage districts, I mean, you can really get into it when you start. Everybody we do business with, there are just so many that we could exclude unnecessarily. So, but anyway, that's why we drafted it. We drafted it.
Any other questions, Commissioner Gold?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have something, Commissioner Hansen?
No, I was just observing one of the biggest agencies isn't even a taxing district, but we encourage them to come, and that's VRT, because they haven't been granted the ability to raise their local funds that way. So,
Thank you. Well, thank you, Steve.
So my direction is?
I think we'll come up with a second option, and we will float both of them to you a couple weeks in advance, and we're going to invite the cities, the county, hear their testimony as well as others at the public hearing on the 3rd. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Very well. Thank you.
So stay there, Steve. we're moving into the access management one.
No, this is Ryan.
Oh, okay. I was like, don't get too comfy. Okay. All right. So to help Ryan get settled, I just want to extend my apologies that we didn't get this to you sooner. There was a delay and hang up over the weekend. So by no means do I expect y'all to be like, oh, I read this morning and I know exactly what I'm going to comment about. That's not my expectation or our expectation. So, shifting gears a little bit. So I think I wanted to just take a little bit of time to talk about what is in this draft right now in terms of who has seen it, what this proposed language is, and then what are some of the philosophical things that I've adjusted based off of Commissioner Hansen's initial edits. And then from there, if the commission so desires, we can go through the document piece by piece. I did include some comments from Mr. Head because I thought they were really helpful and clear and succinct. And I think that's a really good starting off point when we have questions about some of the language that staff presented. So generally speaking, this copy that we have has Commissioner Hansen's requests. It also has staff requests that includes like pro-WAG language, clarifying some pieces. And then I have also added some language in which I have either adjusted Commissioner Hansen's, adjusted staff's, but this is kind of the working copy from here on out. And I know it's a little kind of complicated with all the different edits. So if you have any other ideas of how we can streamline it, I'm all ears. But basically the big philosophical ones that I wanted to start off with was Commissioner Hansen, you wanted to incorporate the word street. And I'm more inclined, and this is what I would like to just talk as a commission, I'm more inclined to keep the word roadway in place. And that's what's reflected in this document, in this draft. Because I feel like that is more inclusive and like aligns with state statute. So that's, and then the definition of roadway in state statute is more broad than it is as street. And so that's kind of why I made that edit. But I mean, do you have anything else to share on that?
Well, no, just I appreciate that, and I appreciate Ryan being here because he's got to actually deal with this. We have livable street design guides. We refer to street typologies. There is the word street throughout, and we use the word road and roadway and highway and right of way. So then the question is, when you use different terms, are you referring to different things? And so that's why I thought, well, from my reading of the policies, all of the policies, is that we're talking about the street, which is what we built out, and then the space, the physical geographic space that ACHD has jurisdiction over, whether it's open or unopen, is called the right-of-way. And it seems to me those are the two things we ought to be referring to. But if it makes more sense to then also have roadway, because there's some definition on a state statute that refers to it as a roadway, is that equivalent to a street? So it just makes it confusing if we use different terms referring to the same thing. And that's why I thought, let's just pick a term. We've already picked it. We call them street typologies. Arterials are streets. Collectors are streets. Locals are streets. So let's just use the same term throughout the whole thing. In fact, we have a whole policy called the Livable Street Design Guide, and we use the word street in it. So I just
Great question,
appreciate
Commissioner
consistency.
Hansen. Yeah.
And one of the weaknesses, I think, of our policies is we've added stuff over the years from different departments, and we use different terms, and then it gets confusing, and then only some 2 or 3 insiders know what it means, and the rest of us don't.
Steve.
Madam President, Commissioner Hansen, great point, and you are absolutely right. Over time, we have used different terms throughout our policy, but I will tell you that the state code is probably worse than we are. That it drives highway lawyers crazy. You can talk to Chris Meyer. I mean, he's got a whole page in his highway book on that topic. And it only really becomes an issue when the term that's used becomes in dispute. Everybody kind of knows generally. But if I were going to pick a term, I would pick the term highway, and I'll tell you why. highway under Idaho code includes everything, including pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, bicycle lanes. That definition includes all modes under Idaho law. And that's an easy where you just catch it with a catch-all phrase. It doesn't sound near as cool as streets or roadways, but highway is a definition, is more inclusive. And if you really want to go outside that, then you could just simply say public right-of-way. Because then it's everything within the public right-of-way, which this body has jurisdiction over. And I would love to be able to go through and try and, in our policy, and find that consistency, but let's come to a decision of what that term is and then do it. And I think you're right on in terms of a huge problem.
Well, I think we just, at the very beginning of the policy, say that the terms highway in the state statute refers to, we're gonna use the term street from here on, or roadway from here on out, and then it's consistent. So we might make that tie-in, and then we use the same terminology in our own policies. So our own policies don't use different terminology.
Commissioner McKinney?
Yes, Madam President, Steve, doesn't our policy have a definition section that indicates that roadway, street, and highway are all interchangeable?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney. No.
Okay, well, that's something that ought to be there. We do have a definition section, I believe. Isn't there a definition section in our policy?
No. Well, in some sections, but not what we're talking about.
Well, and it would make, in my mind, it would make sense to use the word highway, given that we are the Ada County Highway District. And that would, if we make it clear that the term highway refers to everything that we do, then, that makes it, that's perfectly acceptable. Likewise, you have the Federal Highway Administration. They deal with every kind of street, well, for the most part. And so it would make sense to use the word highway throughout, but it would also be good to include a statement somewhere that the words roadway and street, if they are used, they are also interchangeable and mean highway. So it's just a matter of clarification. So
we can do that.
Yep. On this topic alone, Commissioners Goldthorpe and Gold, what are your thoughts?
Don't have many. I'd like to read it first.
Did you have a preference though on the terms of like highway versus roadway?
A highway is fine. And adding a definition section is critical.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that highway works for the purposes, but it does have a connotation. So I think that clarifying that and saying that it's interchangeable with other terms is helpful.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then that solves one big, whole slew of edits in the document. So thank you. Another one that I removed out of Commissioner Hansen's draft was the citation of health and safety. Your note of that inclusive language, because I'm of the mindset, I think that language can be put into the 1,000 section. And I think we have a little bit, I don't think the commission has a clear sense of wanting that language in these sections either. That's just my read of the room. And so I think that would be better suited in that 1,000 section, and that can apply to the rest of the policies, and that can simplify the language.
So, yeah, I think referencing life, health, and safety is just this notion that when you're step into the right-of-way, the city's jurisdiction ends with respect to life, health, and safety, and ACHD's picks up as a special purpose district. And that's why I thought it was fairly innocuous, but it needs to be consistent. And you're right, if it's not used in the initial definition and 1,000 section, then its absence will be noted elsewhere. But if it is in there, then it does apply throughout. But I just think it's important that life, health, and safety, we actually sort of backdoor it by saying we don't like crashes, and crashes are bad. Well, what are crashes? But, impairments to life, health, and safety of human beings, either in or outside of a car or motor vehicles. So, you know, I can see us doing that, but yeah, well, again, it's the issue of let's be consistent, and its absence from our policies, having read them all, is pretty notable. And yet we do say we are concerned about safety, and we reference safety, but then we don't define it, and we don't, and we talk about crashes and so forth, but we don't define it. So I just want it clear that actually we do care about it, and we measure it, and the whole purpose behind this whole policy we adopted, although it's not been incorporated in here on the Livable Streets Performance Measure, has everything to do with life, health, and safety of people who are walking and biking.
Yes, Steve?
Madam President, I think there may be some confusion. The issue of life, health, general welfare, that is a general purpose government term. And that is clearly their responsibility. But that responsibility does not end at the public right-of-way. The city still has police power, and they're responsible for policing what's in the right-of-way. And it's in some way a cross-jurisdictional encroachment on our part to do that. If anything, for people, it just, I think it's unnecessary confusion. I think the word safety is fine. If you want to include a definition of safety, we can do that. Now, I've been in commission meetings in the past where we've talked about safety and what the definition is, and it's a very hard term to define. But we most certainly, the problem in trying to define it is that you can get too narrow and too specific, and the word, if you get it in front of a judge what safety is, he gets it. And so that generality is on our side in terms of any interpretive, and that's what we're really that's what these words matter. It's how it's interpreted. And if there's ever a question, then that's when it matters. But I think the general intent by the commission is your responsibilities are to make sure that the public, all users of the public right-of-way, are safe. At the end of the day, that's what and how you define it, well, we can take a shot at it, but I'm sorry, Commissioner Hanson, I see that issue different with the general purpose governments and our responsibilities.
And I don't want to get into a debate on that right now. That's for a different, when we talk about the 1,000 section. So but I just want to make that noted that I removed that as part of, because that was in your edits. So you're not going to see that reflected in this version. And then the other thing is, Commissioner Goldthorpe, you had asked for a preamble, some edits in the preamble to refine and limit some of the other redundancies that you thought were in the policy. So Steve, I know you just came when I told you to get comfy. You just can't help yourself. Sorry, Ryan. We'll get to you. We'll get to you next. Yeah, it's for your own good. Can you talk a little bit about how the preamble, just the wording of the preamble, please?
Madam President, thank you. Well, when I reviewed this, there's lots of duplication and so and redundancy, and so the simplest way to get rid of that is through kind of a preamble or one sentence at the beginning. And so I included this, and this is something that Commissioner Goldthorpe and I had talked about. These policies shall be and this is the alternate language, second paragraph of the very.
In the purple.
It's in the purple, and it says, these policies shall be interpreted to ensure any authorized access meets the safety needs for all users of the public rights of way. That takes care of a lot. And you can go into the policy where you talk about, and there's still in that, sometimes we use modes of transport such as walking, biking, transit, and motorized vehicle use as well. In other places, we're using motorized and non-motorized. I mean, there's a little bit, just in on paragraph 3 or page 3, you do it. And so the one thing that we would be recommending whatever the commission decides to do with this access policy is that we recommend that there be a technical edit done to remove a lot of the duplicative and redundant language. We understand what the substantive points are by the commission, and I commit to you that we wouldn't, impede on any of that. It's just simply a wordsmithing to make sure that we have a clearly well-written policy for all people that can understand it when they read it. So that's why we've included that preamble.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, can I, in that regard, can I offer one comment, sort of an observation? There are a lot of places where it mentions, motor vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, etc. It seems to me that we ought to just use the word traffic, because it's all traffic. No matter what the mode is, it's all traffic. And if we can just talk about in terms of traffic, we avoid a lot of these redundancies, a lot of the duplication. Whatever the facility is, there's relevant traffic for it, and we deal with that. And it's access to, to highways. So that's just one of those things that I noticed as I was going through it.
Commissioner McKinney, I appreciate that. I'm wondering though, like reading through the policy as it relates specifically to access management, I think that there's some key points where it's important to call out how access management can impact different users in different ways. So when we're just saying, generally this is going to cause issues with traffic, that isn't clear enough to our staff or our partners about, well, what type of clashes are you talking about, or how does this access piece impact this type of user differently than it does a different type of user? So I definitely agree with the sentiment of what you're trying to say is let's simplify it in a lot of ways, but I think that would be maybe a bridge too far in some instances where we do need to be really specific about how access management can impact different users differently.
We always have to be specific. Every time we have something that involves access, we have to drill down to the smallest.
Madam President,
Commissioner
I would agree. I have no problem with the added language in the 7200, the additional sentence, but I would disagree that we should then eliminate all of the description existing and new under the purposes, benefits, and goals, which is 7202.2. 7202.2, purposes, benefits, and goals, which to me is the preamble for the access management. It sort of describes why access management is important and what's the context. There's a whole bunch of existing language which I found somewhat confusing and inconsistent, which is why it was important to have new language put in to make it more consistent, especially with our Global Streets Design Guide. So that's why
Madam President, if I may, I agree with your
leave that section in.
Yeah, that language is actually some of the best. So yeah.
Okay. And then I wanted to, so Ryan, over to you. Sorry. It's your moment now. Sorry. Had a lot to get through. I just wanted to go through some of the comments that I left in here of yours, just to see if there were any questions, because I think that's easy to call out without you guys having time to read through the document. But on page 2, there was a section that you deleted about master street map. Can you just explain that a little bit? It's on section 7201.2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam President, Commission,
This one.
really the intent of this section was to highlight the importance of policy or higher level plans that the Commission has adopted, such as the master street map, the bike master plan, and then the neighborhood plans, and establishing the vision for those streets. In this case, I didn't feel like it was necessary to go into great detail of what the master street map is and how it's amended, because we have a whole policy on that. And so this section was really, and these edits were really intended to just highlight that, as well as recognize that those are developed with our land use agencies in establishing that vision.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions about that?
Madam President, only in that I had included reference to our livable street design guide. Is that something that our future arterials and others are have an impact in that? No, I don't have a problem with that referring back to, because clearly we have another lift to do to amend section 3111.
Is the livable, I can't remember off the top of my head, is livable streets design guide, is that referenced at least in here in this access management policy? I think Steve's nodding his head yes.
Madam President,
in our
the
latest
Livable Streets
sentence.
Design Guide is not,
No.
I don't recall a particular reference to it. It is referenced through the master street map, however.
Okay,
The master street map uses the designations in the Livable Street Design Guide. And so by reference, it is there.
thank you,
There is
Ryan.
proposed adding it 7203.8 livable streets performance measures right at the end.
Okay, well, we'll wait to get to that. So one question I had, and it's on page 4, you can see my comment there in blue. The whole idea of the definitions again, because I'm like, mobility arterials, like what is that? Because that's not referenced earlier, and could you explain that a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, Madam President, Commission, a mobility arterial is defined in the Livable Street Design Guide. The primary corridors, just for reference point, where it is used is 10-mile Fairview, Overland, and State Street, if I recall the key places where it's used within our master street map. And really the intent is that these roads are local roads, not state roads, but local roads that are intended to carry vehicular traffic at long distances. And so there's specific limitations that are highlighted here. In doing that, one of the things we noted, and this is a place where there's some difference between the different types of modes of transportation, where you would want to limit automobile accesses more on a mobility arterial so that they do not conflict with themselves. Having additional pedestrian or bicycle access to a business or a land use doesn't conflict with that. And so as written in here, you would try to defer those to the lesser classified streets in that case, except in certain circumstances that we spell out.
Okay, and then if it's not really clear here, so the purple is the staff's edits and revisions. The black is Commissioner Hansen's, and I believe the blue is mine. So that's the
blue and purple are both staff.
Okay.
And I think the red was.
It didn't show up as red on ours, so.
Oh, okay.
So no,
On mine it
the
is.
blue is mine, the purple is staff's, and then the black is Commissioner Hansen's. But
Perfect.
I think what we'll do moving forward is, you obviously have this copy, but we'll have, Stacy, if you could accept all the changes in this version and then send a clean one out to the commission so that that's a little bit easier on the eyes. And then we can see it for flow. I think that would be helpful too. So, okay. And then, the next one on page 6, Commissioner Hansen had some language at the bottom. It's that last paragraph under 7202.4.2 on temporary access. You had the last bit of or other means of access, and we were worried that it might be a little bit too broad to be implementable. I'm in favor of removing that, but I wanted to check with you, Commissioner Hansen, if you had any other thoughts about that.
No, that wasn't a big deal for me, but I just was trying to keep that open, so there are other means of access to a piece of property.
We can go ahead and then remove that one then.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Often there is. It can be negotiated with adjacent property, but.
Okay. And then there's some other additions. I loved that Ryan included on page 7 under general requirements, general 7203.1. You included some PROAG stuff. So we talked about MIG and our ADA work. And so Ryan, can you just talk a little bit about that and how you've applied some of those requests from that audit to this policy?
Yeah, Madam President, Commission, 7203 is where we start to away from the access management policy and start to get into kind of an overview of how development is handled in general. In this case, we wanted to make sure that PROAG was our guiding document, make that official. It's been what we've been acting off of for quite some time, but we wanted to officially adopt that as an agency as the best practice that we would use.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions about that? Okay. And then, oh yeah, then here's Livable Street performance measures on page 9. That edition, and that's essentially it. So, you have this copy. We'll send you out a clean copy. We'll make some revisions, I think, too, about the highway language. So we'll make sure that highway is consistent throughout.
Or define street or roadway. I think it's more, I agree with Commissioner Gold's comment, are using highway referring to a little local road is probably not appropriate, especially public is supposed to read these too, and that we can just make that connection in our definitions.
Okay.
I have
Well,
a
then-
couple kudos to Brian for his comment. There's his.
So Steve, you and I will work on that then? Okay, great. Any other comments generally about this policy draft?
Madam President,
Commissioner Gold?
I'll just say that I support the intent and the purpose of these edits, and so I thank you and Commissioner Hansen for leading on this. And I also want to say that I agree with Steve's comments about the need for a technical edit, because pulling a lot of that extra language out and making it more concise is going to make it more readable. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
And thanks for the simplification of the preamble.
So, Madam President, there's a couple words, just to go back and look, we might want to look at, the word improvement is too generic. That's why I take the word improvement and just refer to facilities. You know, it's a road facility. Whether or not it is an improvement is a judgment call. It is what it is. And so I think that gets us into trouble if we use that some places and we don't use it others. That's why. So we might go through and see, just refer to it for what it is, a facility. I really appreciate you kept in the concept of reasonable travel time, because that's really about what we're doing. We use TDM, travel demand management. And that should be, rather than the really vague notion of what's a delay, a delay. It's about travel times. The other is the incorporation and reference back to the city's role, the general purpose, the land use agencies, those who have land use authority, and referring back to that. And the recognition that our street typologies were created after our streets were created. And that the notion of all these typologies in this perfect hierarchy may be an engineer's dream, but it's not a reality. That every single street, every arterial has different issues, and that makes it really complicated to then make that assumption that it will have the same access issues. They aren't. Every arterial has different access complexities, and so there has to be some underlying standards about safety and reasonable travel times and mobility that really help to determine that, and then ultimately the land use authority, whether they want to make hard decisions or not, they're supposed to, and they're the ones who really need to be playing a big role in that. And I like that you've continued to keep that in as you've gone through. I haven't gone, since I only had a couple hours this morning to go through it, I haven't gone through it, and I appreciate that.
Okay, so then,
Madam
did you have
President,
something?
may I just make one additional comment? There was something that was added, but then it's not showing up here, and wanted to make sure that you are all aware. This is the comment about providing staff and then bringing it to the lowest level where staff can waive the taking access off a higher or lower classified street policy. That there is a proposed language there. We'll make sure that it's in the edit that goes out to you all. It's in a later section of the policy. So we wanted to highlight that so that is also giving staff that ability, the intent is that they would work with the cities in those conversations, and while also making sure that it's safe. So really, this goes back to even your prior conversation. We want to, while we do want to have the taxing districts have standing, we want to solve as many of these problems at a staff level as we can, and by opening some of that up, that's the intent of how we are trying to phrase these things.
Well said. Thank you, Ryan. All right, just to sum it up, Steve and I are going to chat about some of the requests and definitions. We'll make some other edits. In the meantime, Stacy will still send out a clean version of this copy that you have, but we will send out an additional new one with some of these updates that we've talked about today. I've talked to staff about what's next for this proposed policy change, and typically it is shared with our community partners, the development community, all sorts of folks like that, because this is a really important policy that impacts their work quite a lot. So we want to be really mindful about that and give folks ample time to review this, give us their feedback. And so the timeline is staff are going to share this out through our various advisory committees, other types of partners that we typically do this type of work with. And the tentative date is to have a public hearing on this policy by June 7th. So it'd be 5 weeks of public outreach, which I think is pretty sufficient. And I think, we'll obviously send out this other draft for you to gnaw on. So if you have other edits in the meantime, I'd love to hear it. We can always bring this back as a work session item as well, but we want to keep it pretty minimal because we'll be sharing out this next draft with those partners. So, Steve, did I miss anything?
Madam President, I just might recommend that before we go out, that we have the commission's buy-in on the final
Sure.
language. And if we could work hard and come back to the commission by next Wednesday and then get your thumbs up, then we have a draft that we feel comfortable with going out with. So I would like to see that happen.
That sounds good.
Yeah, which I just want to clarify, that is not an agreement that we support the language, that's that we want the
Correct.
language to go out, because
Correct.
the problem is that things just get pushed out too much.
Very true.
Thank you.
So that does not mean that we're accepting it. It's just that is the draft we're going to share out to the public. So thank you for that reinforcing that.
And I would ask that we then, while this is going out, we then work on another set of
Absolutely.
policies and not wait until after June 7th to start that. Otherwise, we'll only get to 1 or 2 by the end of the year.
Any other thoughts, commissioners? Okay. Thank you so much for your participation, your questions, your thoughts. Thank you, staff. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.